Gearing in FF14 is uninteresting. There, I said it. Honestly, much of the community has agreed on this point for quite some time. I hear some players suggesting that maybe if there are more sources of gear, such as gear from Criterion Dungeon, that gearing might become more interesting. In my opinion, if you think this, you're coping bad. I think you might have mixed up cause and effect. The boring nature of FF14 gearing isn't because there are multiple sources of gear. The lack of varying sources of gear is actually a result of the boring stat and substat design of the gear. Basically, what I'm saying is that there's no reason for the devs to add more sources for gear, because having more sources for gear add no value to the player experience under the current main stat and substat system. Just think about it. Currently the most important stat is weapon damage, followed by main stats. Both weapon damage and main stats are exactly the same on gear of the same eye level. The only difference lies in substats, which is most basic of basic, and it also carries a minuscule weight compared to weapon damage and the main stat. You get enough skill speed and spell speed for the right GCD and stack as much crit as possible, while keeping determination and direct hit relatively balanced. That's all you have to do, and that's just boring. So even if they add gear to Criterion Savage, let's say it rewards possibly a few pieces of gear that might overall increase the preferred substat by 100 to 200, will you really bust your ass to clear Criterion Savage? I think the answer for 99.9% of players, a definitive no. That's just not gonna cut it. I'm just imagining myself as a mid-core player. Maybe I clear Savage tier by, I don't know, say week 6, and I clear Savage for an additional 8 weeks after that. That's already a 3-month plus commitment. And now you're telling me to get this, I need to do Criterion or maybe Criterion Savage for a 0.1% increase in damage from a tiny improvement in my substats? I don't know, that sounds boring, lame, and annoying to me. Now I know some of you might say, wait, some of us did Chaotic Raid because it dropped gear. Well, let me ask you this. Did you do Chaotic Alliance Raid because of the stats on the gear, or because of the glamour, or mounts and minions? I'm willing to bet that most who did Chaotic Alliance Raid did not care at all for the stats on the gear drop. Anyway, when my thought process arrived at this point, I began to think of some of the other games I've played, where I've enjoyed the gearing system. And I gradually realized that the reason having multiple gearing options in these other games is interesting is because different gear in these other games provide bonus effects that can impact your gameplay in unique ways. Emphasis on having an impact on your gameplay in unique ways. The substats in FF14 just have little impact on your gameplay. And that is why basically having more sources of gear under the current stat design won't change anything. And this is really why I believe that for more gearing options to even matter, CB3 will have to first modify how they design gear. They need to first ensure that different gear from different sources have a unique impact on the player's gameplay. Now, I will acknowledge that there is some merit to the current design. The super simple current design makes it easy for devs to balance stuff. And it also keeps things simple for most players. All you have to do is equip the highest eye level item for the most part. The downside though is an uninteresting gearing system, which I think causes a significant number of players to have little interest in doing content for gear. I really do believe that having more interesting and impactful gear stat and bonus effects, that design is needed to motivate players into doing content. And this ultimately is my hope for gearing in 8.0 for Final Fantasy XIV. There has been some news going around where Yoshi P spoke of revamping the game in 8.0. I really am hoping that gear stat design gets a revamp as well. Now I think it's important to demonstrate what I mean when I say impactful gear stat and effect design. I'm not a game dev, but I will offer a suggestion that I think is the most straightforward to execute in this game. This is an idea common across many games, and frankly, many in the community have already suggested this over the years, which is gear set bonus effects. Currently, we have 5 left side pieces and 5 right side pieces. I'm of the opinion that in order to make gearing interesting, it's best to have the most economical gear set bonus effect at maybe 2 or 3 set pieces, because this allows players to mix gear sets from different sources. So let me illustrate this whole thing properly. To keep things balanced, the crafted set will have no set bonuses. This way, when a Savage is released, the raids can be easily balanced for crafted set. However, Ultimate will have to be balanced around these gear set bonuses, but I think devs should be able to monitor the gear set bonuses and balance them before an Ultimate is released, especially since an Ultimate comes out 4 to 5 months after a Savage tier. Anyway, let's assume in a gear cycle there's the Tome set, Savage raid set, Criterion set, and maybe even Alliance raid set. Obviously a tank set should have specific effects for all the 4 different tanks. But anyway, I will be focusing on Warrior as an example here. So first, left side of Tome set, let's look at the most economical 3-piece bonus. Decrease Felt Cleave cost by 10 gauge. And then maybe for right side of Tome set, the most economical 3-piece bonus. For 10 seconds after Storm's Eye, each Felt Cleave extends Storm Eye's buff by 5 seconds. Let's look at left side of Savage raid set, most economical 3-piece bonus. Felt Cleave range increases by 6 yards. Right side of Savage raid set at 3-piece bonus, 60% of self-healing via bloodwetting dealt as damage to all surrounding foes. Left side of Criterion dungeon set, economical 3-piece bonus, Tomahawk reduces cooldown of Infuriate by 10 seconds. Right side of Criterion dungeon set, economical 3-piece bonus, 50% chance that you can immediately use Storm's Path after executing Storm's Eye. Okay, look, I'll stop here at this point because I think you can see what I'm trying to demonstrate, right? If CB3 is willing to go for these sorts of gear set bonuses and put in the effort to balance this style of design that impacts the job rotation for Ultimate, gearing will become much more interesting in FF14. And once this gear is more interesting, then having more gearing options from even more sources that players have to choose from, only then will that become meaningful. More players will be driven to do content to get all these bonus effects that are very impactful on the job capability. And some players might even collect all of them so they can mix and match to adjust their job capabilities for different types of bosses. For example, if a boss fight has mechanics that force more melee downtime, the gear set that increases Felt Cleave range and give bonus effects when using Tomahawk will be optimal in such a situation. Anyway, ultimately all I'm saying is, I really don't think having more gearing options with the current stat and substat design will feel rewarding or interesting at all, because honestly, no one will care much for a few pieces of gear with different substats that increase the damage by 0.1% or something like that. If you think Criterion rewarding gear will make gearing interesting, you're coping bad. The only way for gearing to be interesting in this game is if CBU3 finds a way to design gear to have an impact on job rotation and capabilities. The downside to that, obviously, as mentioned before, is CBU3 will then have to put in more effort to balance these bonus effects. But there's also an additional benefit, because if these gear set bonuses are different for every gear cycle, in my opinion, this would be an extremely effective method of keeping gameplay fresh every single gear cycle in the same expansion without needing to change the core of each job in the game. But anyway, that's it from me today, and I hope everyone is enjoying patch 7.4.